Yeah, it's a great analogy. I love an analogy that really helps a simple-minded guy like me visualize what's going on there. You mentioned just a few minutes ago that the data that had been put together from the early days, uh, you knew would make Claris more attractive to, I think the words you used were a different kind of VC. So I want to understand that a little bit better. The funding scene in general and your strategy around funding the company. But what do you mean by a different kind or a different group of VCs?
So. If you think of VCs as an ecosystem, you have the mice and then you have the elephants, and the larger VCs, they move together. So they're always investing together, and the reason for that is they like to write big checks, or they have to write big checks, right? So if you have a large fund, you have to spend your time on larger investments, and then you only invest with people who are like-minded, that write those large checks, because you can't have you obviously can't deal with a smaller VC that can't write those checks, right? Eventually, they can't write the 20 million, the $30 million checks.
Hmm.
So I think when you get closer to the clinic, as a function of the amount of money you need to raise and what you're going to spend, those VCs will come in. So I think in the early days, you tend to attract smaller VCs, but those VCs that are going to help you with an IPO, or launch a product, or maybe, eventually you might be sold to a larger pharma. But those VCs are going to want to write the bigger checks. So the closer you're to the clinic or in the clinic, that's where they tend to invest.
Hmm.
Novo's a little different. They do seed all the way through, and they're different in many ways. They're also an evergreen fund, so they don't have limited partners, and so they're a lot more patient,
Hmm.
and can be more patient. So,
Yeah. So tell me about that. I guess those days for you, Clarke. I mean, you got Novo on board early. What were there other fundraising partners, players, other efforts on your part, or was it sort of like we got our big partner, let's move forward?
oh no, no, we talk to a lot of people. It's you talk to a lot of people, and I
Yeah.
think so. I think in raising money, the first thing is you have to be prepared with your plan and ready to go, because if you're out there for too long, that becomes a reason not to invest, right? If you've been raising money for a year and nobody's moving, that hurts you. So I think you have to have everything ready to go. So we had our key opinion leaders ready to go, our SAB, we had our plan, we had our deck together. We'd already talked to Greenville. We'd spent a lot of time getting everything ready, and then we went out the door. We were fortunate that Novo came in early, but we had been talking to a lot of other groups, such as RA, who also invested in us.
Hmm.
And we were also fortunate, because it's a Harvard technology, of having, uh, uh, well, at the time, they were called, what are they called? I'm forgetting the name now, but they're Mass General. They came in as as investors as well,
Hmm.
and so we were very fortunate to have them, because they obviously understood that ecosystem, especially in Boston. So they were able to introduce us to a lot of investors as well. But no, we talked to a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. Was that like the like 90% of your job at the time?
Yes, raising money was the biggest part of the job, and it's a it's it's a it's a necessary evil. I don't enjoy it. It's not fun. It is, however, really valuable, if in lots of different ways. One is your business plan is pressure tested, and it's tested by very smart people. And they're people who are wanting to say no. That's every VC that you talk to. Their first thought is, how do I just get rid of this? And if they can't come up with a reason, then they start to get interested and they move forward. But we learned a lot from talking to VCs. They pressure tested, and fortunately, our plan was pretty good. But they did give us ideas. Every meeting, we would get something new or think of something new. There'd be a question. It was like, how do we answer that? So that was very helpful. I think through the process of talking to VCs and how they do their diligence, you learn a lot. And so our all of our investors were very, very thorough in their diligence, and we enjoyed the diligence. It was rigorous, but you also learned that they're very smart people, and they're people who you want on your side more than just the money, but you want the thoughtful conversations and then the value they added during the process. So I think that's very, very helpful.
Yeah.
And there's some that you walk out of the meeting room, it's like, I really don't want their money. They're not nice people and they don't treat each other well. Like you can watch how they treat their partners. It's like, this is the people they work with. I don't want to work with them. This is how
Wow.
they treat people.
Yeah.
So it's a necessary evil, but it could be very valuable.
Yeah. You mentioned that you said it's hard work, and you said you said you don't enjoy it. Which I can totally relate with. I'm like the furthest thing from a business development person. Like sales, not my gig. Um, but how did you personally uh, learn it, and even more importantly, reconcile with yourself, like that this is something that you need to do, and that you're going to go out there and you're going to do it, right? Like you got to get comfortable with it despite your aversions. You've got to embrace it, and you got to go out there, otherwise you'll drive yourself mad, right? So I guess personally, what did you do to reconcile it? And then you said you learned with every meeting and improved with every meeting, but even in advance of that, going into it, like how did you learn how to be a fundraiser?
Well, I think I was so my education started at iTech, and it was my first time at a company where I was a consultant, but I had a lot of interactions with their board, and so I saw how their investors, asked questions, what they were concerned about, what they were interested in. So I think that was my first sort of touch. I think at Lux, I was one of the co-founders of Lux, and Dr. Uli Grau was our CEO, and I watched as he approached the fundraising. So I was with him through that process. So I
Mhm.
was kind of co-pilot, as it were, in that process as the COO. And so I followed that. And then I was very fortunate that at that time I had Thomas Durberg was on our board at Lux, and he very much became a mentor to me. And I learned a lot from conversations through him how an investor thought and what was important to them. I think the fact that I don't like the process, it helps you select better projects
Mm.
because you're like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to have to, for the want of a better word, drink from the fire hose, and I'm not going to enjoy it. So it better be worth it at the other side of this. So I think you pick projects that you think will really work and that you're excited about. And so I think that it's a good litmus test for a good project. It's like, oh, this is going to suck, and I'm going to have to go raise this money, but I really believe in this, and I really want to take this forward. So
I
it's
imagine that
helpful
would
that way.
Yeah, and I imagine that would hold some weight. Like you sit down in a meeting, and if you're fortunate enough to be in a meeting with a VC group who is tuned in to your personality and what you're doing there, like why you're there. I imagine that has got to hold some weight with them versus the biotech BD person or fundraiser um, who enjoys the sport of it, right? Like you don't enjoy you don't I almost feel like going into one of these meetings and being like, listen, guys, I'm not here for the sport of it is probably going to set you off on the right foot from the outset.
I think it does. I think we're fortunate that we have our investors are amazing. I enjoy working with them. They're thoughtful. I learn things from them. They guide us well. Our board meeting, we take votes at board meetings because you have to for meeting minutes and things like that. But we've never had to take a board vote for anything at Claris so far where it's been contentious or people have to vote. They're very, very smart people and super supportive. I mean, if you think about when Silicon Valley Bank blew up and all of our money was there, we got calls from them. It's like, we have money. If you need to make payroll, we're here. They were calling us on the weekends. They're just incredibly thoughtful and yeah, just good people.
Yeah.
A lot of entrepreneurs have bad stories with VCs. I don't have any really.
Yeah.
But I think it's
Amazing.
partly that selection process.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
You've mentioned used the word we, like in those early days, building the company, fundraising. I want to get as sort of an abbreviated chronology of the we from the outset, right? So like it was you and these two doctors from Harvard, some other folks who were interested. You got some VCs on board, started building a board. What did the we look like then? The we of Claris Bio, and kind of walk us through what the we looks like now as you're in the throes of clinical activity.
So we started out. It was Reza and Sunil and myself initially, and then Meredith Fisher at Mass General was very helpful in and supportive of us and helping sort of. We would bounce ideas off of her, and she's still on our board and an amazing person, um, and super thoughtful. But that was the we at that time, and then as we moved forward, we had a legal team, and so Joe Favors is our counsel, and again, can't I've worked with him for 15 years. Just an amazingly smart person, and very thoughtful. But we worked with them, and then after the legal team, our first hire was Dr. Susan Orr. She had done diligence for Alcon on Lux Biosciences, so I got to know her through that process, and we just stayed in contact with each other and had great respect for her because, again, she was doing diligence on Lux, and the questions and the thoughtfulness and the integrity was very important. So Susan came on board. Shortly after that, Piotr Bryla came on as our formulation CMC expert. And it was funny. We had mentioned to the VCs that we would, or to our investors, that we would formulate the drug in 4 months, and they were told us all it was impossible. And he did it in 4 months. So
Mm.
it was very good. We were lucky though. We have a good protein that's very stable. And then from there, we it was during the pandemic, so we were all co-located in different places. And so Susan had worked with Tony Luan, who was a clinical expert and in development. So we brought her on, and then so we were a 4-person company for a while, and then about a year and a half ago, we decided to bring on somebody who would be our chief business officer, and we were very fortunate to. That was through a recruiter, and met Henry Routh, and he's joined, and we're very lucky. We get along very, very well. We finish each other's sentences. I am a recovering micromanager, so I'm on I think step 11, and so I think that's really helpful for me that we've been a virtual company for the last couple of years. So we don't have tons of meetings, and everybody's very, very good at what they do and very senior. So we don't monkey with each other's work a lot, and we
Yeah.
have a really good culture. Very like-minded people, so that's very important. Because I think one of the things I've learned as a CEO is culture eats strategy for lunch.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the right culture, it doesn't matter how brilliant your strategy is. You're
That's
doomed.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's selectivity. Again, selectivity. You mentioned sort of selectivity being a theme around the VC exercise, and I imagine that comes to bear pretty heavily as well when you're building out your C-suite.
Definitely, definitely. And again, I think it's that network and the people you know. I've been into companies with Piotr. It's my first company with Susan, but I've known her for a very, very long time.
Hmm.
And then our founders, our scientific co-founders, Reza and Sunil, I've known them for a long time too. So
Yeah, very cool. All right, so let's talk a little bit about I opened up with this dramatic this dramatic allusion, to changes in the standard of care in ophthalmic indications. How important was it to you from the outset that you were looking at the potential for sort of changing the administration paradigm for potentially any number of, ocular indications, away from parenteral administration to topical administration. Was that like an important consideration for you, or is that just like, oh man, this is it's a nice to have?
So I think from an administration, it was funny because when I was at iTech, Dr. Chambers had told Dr. Chambers at the time was in charge of the FDA and in ophthalmology, and he had said that you shouldn't really go into the human eye with a needle more than 4 times in a person's life.
Mm.
And so David Geyer definitely changed that paradigm, and people go in, every other month to get an injection for any VEGF or any of those therapies for AMD or DME. But for us, the sort of switch in the paradigm is that if you think about it, and you still hear it from companies today, that they're only interested in the back of the eye. And the reason they say that, it's code for that's where the value is, right? Because you can charge to preserve and actually improve vision at the back of the eye. You can charge a significant amount of money for that therapy, and that also sort of wrapped up in the intended fact that they're biologics.
Mm-hmm.
In the front of the eye, the business model has always been volume. So the most successful drugs in the front of the eye are usually, dry eye has been where you see the billion-dollar molecules, and that's what's driven that. I think with the launch of Oxervate, which is NGF for an orphan disease, that paradigm has shifted from proteins in the back of the eye, not to proteins in the front of the eye, and people see value there. And they're also, I think, recognizing that there are a lot of other indications in the front of the eye that have been underserved. So usually the front of the eye is antihistamines, steroids, dry eye, cyclosporin for the front of the eye. And I think bringing biologics to the front of the eye is very exciting. And we see several indications that we're very interested in.
Yeah.
That we think would really help patients.